Good morning, everyone. Hello, my name is Chris Thorne, and welcome back to our fourth edition of Making Work Work, the interview series where I interview guest experts whose work is instrumental in helping people to be happier at work. So our topic this week is on building a resilient business to thrive during tough times. And well, I think we can all agree that these are interesting times indeed. COVID-19 has thrown all of our worlds upside down, and we're having to find new ways to bounce back and be more resilient in this time of uncertainty. And as we know, the hardest part of coping with any of these changes, it's uncertainty, and it's just not knowing what's going to happen next, which really messes with our minds. So businesses that have plans in place to both develop their people and survive and adapt in the time of COVID are going to be more successful in having people who are happier at work and want to stick around. Now, my guest this week is an expert on the subject of resilience, and I am so excited to interview her because she is a shining example of turning adversity into opportunity. This is Rina Singh, who is a resilience manager and founder and creator of a fantastic resource for professionals in the resilience industry, the Resilience Pod podcast. Rina is an award-winning resilience expert. In 2019, she was part of a team that won the Transformation Award for the Business Continuity Insurance Risk magazine. She's also been a Business Continuity Institute European Newcomer finalist in 2015, as well as a finalist for the Public Sector Professional in 2017. So Rina really knows what it's all about when it comes to resilience. Rina, welcome.
Hey, Chris. Thank you. Great to be here.
Excellent. Rina, just to kind of tell our listeners a little bit about you, when we were chatting the other day, I mean, Rina's got such a fascinating career, and she's got some great things that she's doing, both inside and outside of work. And one of the things that she does to kind of relax and unwind when she's not at work is she cooks, and she posts pictures of the most gorgeous food on Instagram. Rina, what's the latest thing that you've just made?
So yesterday I made a 2-ingredient bagel. So good.
That sounds amazing.
I'm not much of a baker, so
no?
anything that has 2 ingredients and is easy to do, I'm all for that. So yeah, it was so good, and then I had it for breakfast today. So.
Oh wow! So you get two for the price of one, then, really?
Yeah, I don't think I'll ever buy bagels again. It was so
no, too much of a good thing, huh? Oh, wow. Well, Rina, can you just when we were speaking the other day, Rina was giving me a little bit of her background about how she got into doing what she's doing now, and she's had a fascinating career, starting off with her first experience of being resilient. So, fresh out of university, wondering what she was going to do in the wider world, she decided to take the bull by the horns, and she packed up 2 suitcases and headed off to Canada. Rina, tell us a little bit about how you came to be in Canada.
Call me crazy, and some people probably will for this. Yeah, so at uni, people do the traditional thing. They go to university for 3-4 years, and then they get a job, get married, and then have this thing. And there's nothing wrong with that, guys.
No.
So if you're on and you're thinking, what's wrong with that? Nothing. But I didn't want to do that. And that's the kind of traditional path like an Indian woman has to follow as expected. So I thought, well, I don't want to do that because that's boring. So I randomly came across this talk at the university that I was at that had an option to go to either the States or to Canada.
Okay.
And Canada appealed to me because I could actually do, instead of working in theme parks and stuff, which is there's nothing wrong with that. I could actually go and work in a business, so I could have my cake and eat it basically. So get some work experience and then go abroad and see what it's like to live there. So I applied, and then I just packed 2 suitcases and left.
Oh wow, how brave! And you started off in banking, didn't you? And started to learn a little bit about risk management and get into the field that way, didn't you?
I did, yeah. So whilst I was studying and I was at college, I worked in a bank, and that's what kind of got me interested in the whole risk side. So because I saw a lot of fraud, anti-money laundering, and that kind of stuff happen in the branch, and that's what kind of compelled me to think, okay, yeah. Whilst I didn't study the subject at university, I thought, well, I could go into this because it's quite interesting. So that's how it really started, just by chance.
Ah, wow. And so tell me, because one of the other things you mentioned, which I thought was a bit crazy, and I mean, how many of us do this? was that Rena decided that, well, she had some friends and they were having a conversation one day about different things they've done in life, different experiences, and she was kind of like, gosh, well, what have I done? And as most of us do, she just decided that she would just go skydiving, just jump out of a perfectly good airplane. Tell us, how did you come to do that?
So Chris and everyone went, like, as if going to Canada without a job and just 2 suitcases and like three days accommodation wasn't enough of a very risk and a gamble. Once I'd settled in when I was living there and I got a job and I had like made a bunch of friends. I had some friends that were significantly older than me, so I was in my early 20s, and then I had friends in their like 30s. So it was quite a variety of kind of friendship groups, and they were all talking about all these amazing things they'd done. And I sat there and thought, what have I done? Forgetting that I'd actually come to Canada and got a job without any money. Like I had money, but you know what I mean. It was just a bit of a risk. So I just thought, well, I'll just go skydiving, and I told a friend of mine, she came with me, and it was great.
Oh, I mean, it must have been such a rush, really, because it's kind of like it goes against everything that we hold dear, really, isn't it? I don't think I'd be too inclined to jump out of a perfectly good airplane.
It was an experience, but it gave me that sense of, yes, I want to do something and just go for it without thinking too much about it. And I think that's kind of what's kind of got me to where I am today, from obviously from past experience as well, but just being in the moment and thinking, like, okay, if I can, let's just go for it and do it and take that risk.
Oh, I mean, and I know it wasn't all plain sailing over there, wasn't there? You found early on in your career, I mean, you found instances of you were sort of discriminated against by sort of your age or your gender, or and I think at one point you had problems, your face froze for a period of time, didn't you? Tell us what happened there.
So it's not been an easy plain sailing journey. I've been through a lot of challenges. So in my journey from university to go into Canada, and I lived there for 2 years, I remember being so stubborn that I went there, came back, and then worked for a bit here. Then I went back again, and I was stuck in Amsterdam airport because of the snow. And it was really crazy. And then I was drinking a hot drink, a hot chocolate, and the hot chocolate fell down my mouth, the side of my mouth. And I thought, oh, how did I completely miss my mouth? And then my eyes were droopy. One of my side of my face was really droopy. And I thought, what's going on? I remember going to the toilet and being really scared and noticing half my face, like paralyzed.
Oh, wow.
Being quite scared. But I got on the plane, like, this is how stubborn I am. So I got on the plane. Then I got stranded in Amsterdam. So I couldn't go anywhere. I went to the emergency in the airport, and they just said, oh, you've it's not a stroke. So when you Google like symptoms on the internet, and then you think you've got all sorts, like that's how I was feeling.
Sure.
The emergency people said, no, it's not a stroke. You've just got a nerve. It'll get better in a couple of days. So I took the flight to Toronto thinking, yeah, I'll be fine, and then it just progressively got worse and worse and worse when I was out there. Half a paralyzed face. I had Bell's palsy, if you don't know. So it took 6 months to get over that.
Wow.
And then trying to find a job out there when you've got that and you can't really communicate really well is really tough. And then you're out there, and then I'm thinking, well, what have I done? Like, I've kind of fought with my parents, like to come back, and like left a job, and but I made a decision and a commitment to go back out there to see if I could get more experience and maybe live there. And I just thought, what, I'm here, I'm committed, I have to do this now. This is what's going on. What, that actually made me a bit stronger, because I was out there, I overcome challenges. I went for interviews. I got a really good job when I was out there, and it was fine, but it was just that inner strength that I realized I didn't have. So that was a huge challenge. Just in regards to that, but going away from that, because that hasn't held me back, and it never will. There's three things throughout my career that's always kind of there's distinct challenges, what I say, and one of them is gender, because obviously I'm a female, and there's a whole host of challenges that come with being a female. There's also the age thing. So I started in the resilience industry in my 20s, and I remember, for example, going to networking events and only being the youngest person there in my 20s, and then being the only female there, because the industry, which I'll go on to talk about later, is was heavily dominated by males.
Oh, yeah.
And then it's the race factor too, because obviously I'm a
Yeah.
British Indian, and I have faced racism throughout my schooling, throughout my ages, and even at work, in the workplace. So it's, I call it the triple whammy. Like,
Well, I remember you saying that you applied for a job and someone even told you, oh, well, you're too young for the job. And it's obviously that's not supposed to happen, but it's like, ooh, how did you respond to that?
yeah, so I was shocked, and I thought it was okay. And this is just not being educated enough or being aware that that's illegal and you can't, that's not a good excuse. I'd applied for the senior position in a company I was working at in London, and basically they chose someone who was in their like 50s and was a man and was just like
Mm.
respected kind of thing, rather than a young
Ooh.
professional. And they said to me in the interview, you're really good, but you are a bit young, so we're going to give it to somebody else. And that is totally wrong. If anybody ever says that to you, you
Unbelievable.
need to take it forward. And the thing is, at that point in my career, I didn't really have the confidence or the knowledge to know that that was wrong. I mean, you feel that it's wrong, but then you can actually go off and do something about it. Um,
Yeah.
and right now, if that ever, any of those things ever happened to me, I know that I wouldn't fear kind of taking it further. But it's what happens to you, and you have to kind of go with it, but also understand that these things, no one should ever say these to you, and it shouldn't really be a factor. But sadly, it is.
Oh gosh, yeah. But clearly you overcame that, and I know you were in Canada for a few years, and then the visa finished, and it was time to come back to the UK. And this, well, we were talking about this when you came back to the UK. That was a really, really pivotal time for you. You really went through some tough times there, and out of that, um, you turned this around, and the Resilience Pod was born. So tell us what happened there.
Yeah, so it's as if I didn't decide to go off to Canada with two suitcases and then have, challenges. I came back, and because my visa ran out, the company I wasn't working for couldn't sponsor me. So, and then, life doesn't turn out sometimes the way you plan it.
No.
So, things don't go according to your plan. And at that time, I thought it was the end of the world, but obviously it wasn't. Um, like mid-20s, and you
It
think,
feels like it though, doesn't it? Because this period of time went on for quite a long time, almost a
it
year, you said.
did. Yeah, so I came back, and then I found it really, I was in a bit of a limbo whether I didn't know whether I was going back, and whether I'd want to come back, stay here permanently. So there was a bit of confusion about that. And then I tried to look for a job, and that was just horrendous. It's showing that I had something valuable to offer, and
Mm,
then showing that it was relevant. And a year and a bit passed, and I still had no job. I was going for interviews,
gosh.
and I was getting through them, but then not hearing back. And,
Oh,
and for no reason, or being told, yeah, you're great, but we've gone with someone else. And it could have been a whole host of reasons,
yeah.
qualified, or that I just don't fit into the area, or just wasn't in it. But there were times when I had no money to go for an interview, and I was so lucky that I was
Mm,
living with my parents, who were like supported my bad decisions.
yeah.
And like my experiences, and I was going through a really rough time, and I felt like it was, and there were like loads of other personal stuff in my life that was going on, and I just felt that it was a really low time in my life. And I thought, how am I going to prove my value? And I remember talking to a recruiter, and they're saying, well, you need to demonstrate that you're aware of what's going on in the industry. And I
Mm.
and then that's how my blog started. So
Oh, okay. So yeah, that's right. I forgot. It started with the blog, didn't it? And then the podcast came later. Yeah.
yeah, so podcasts and stuff are really new, but I start back in 2013. That's when I started writing, because I was always a fan of doing this kind of stuff anyway throughout
Hmm.
university and things like that. I started writing, and the blog was called Risk Size, and I wrote about so many things, interviewed lots of people. So I had like 1 minute, like 50, 60 seconds with so and so, like talking about their journey. And then, then eventually I got a job after kind of like proving my worth and stuff like that
Gotcha.
into London. But yeah, the Risk Size blog kind of formed into Resilience Pod, just based on the experiences I've gained since then, because I started out doing risk management, and then
Oh,
I've done,
yes.
yeah, and now I've done a whole host of stuff in the resilience field, so hence the Resilience Pod. It just kind of it built on that, and it's been a couple of years now. So yeah, when things aren't going right, just getting creative, the ideas hit, and you just roll with it and don't give up.
So I mean, for people out there that aren't familiar with what the resilience industry consists of, I mean, can you kind of explain a little bit about that? What does that mean from a business point of view?
Yeah, so resilience is such a vague word and it means quite a lot in different contexts. Here, I'm talking more about like what organizational resilience would be
Right.
like. So it's more how do businesses become resilient? So if something happens, how are they going to keep their business going? And they do that via a lot of ways. So there's different disciplines that help us become resilient, like a business become resilient. So
Hmm.
there's risk management, looking at the proactive stuff. There's continuity planning. So if something happens, what we're going to do.
Mm.
There's looking at what IT are we going to, what's going to support that. What about cyber? What about human resources?
Mm.
Training. They all are resilience disciplines. It's how an organization combines that all together. So it's a new buzzword really. But when we talk about resilience in this episode and in this context, it's about the business side of it. Rather than resilience in like fitness or resilience in like trauma or things like that. It's more like, okay, what the business going to do to prevent stuff happening
Yeah.
when the incident and things are happening, what measures have they got in place to keep going and not failing over, and that's very prevalent at this time.
Gosh, and why? And tell why is it that you're so passionate about this? Because I know when we were speaking, you were saying to me that what I was saying. What is it that kind of gets you up in the morning? You said, look, if I can impact one person out there and help them and their the business to be more resilient, then I feel like the days, that's a success.
Yeah, absolutely. Because it's about changing people's mindset from reactive to proactive. And
Wow.
a lot of the times in
Mm,
business, it's like, oh, something's happened. Okay, so I need to react this way. So we're firefighting, as they call it, right?
mm,
So we don't want to, there's an element of that too, but you want to be prepared in a way. Things aren't going to be perfect all the time, but it's
mm.
thinking, right, okay, if this situation happens, then what are my options? Like if what's my backup plan? What's my plan B, plan C, D, E, F, that kind of thing. So thinking about it, so when things do go wrong, because they are, because we live in a world
Because
of disruptions.
and how many of us had the global pandemic disruption in mind for the business continuity plan?
Yeah, exactly. And now it's on the agenda for a lot of businesses.
Mm,
So making that impact and driving, if you're in the field to kind of utilize that is really essential. And that's kind of the thing that goes on to what we were talking about earlier was how to create a more resilient business and thrive during a downturn. Like this is the time, like we are in a downturn right now.
yeah. Yeah, and I remember you saying that there were sort of like some key aspects that businesses have to look at in order to do this, starting with planning and just kind of thinking what are those key elements that we need to look at
Yeah.
as a business?
Yeah, so thriving, creating a more resilient business and thriving, you need to start with planning. Okay,
Mm,
you can't thrive if you don't know what you do.
mm,
What as a business, what am I offering? What are you offering is as a service or a product? What is that? If you don't know that, then how are you gonna continue to deliver that when an incident strikes? It doesn't matter if it's a pandemic or it's just a short-term disruption. If you don't know what your core business is and then what's priority, you're not going to understand like how to keep running, because in an incident you can't do everything business as usual, and that's where there's always an issue in that kind of um, in our industry is we're trying to do everything at once, but we're not. It's priorities. It's looking back at what's more critical. And then secondly, it's more all about, I feel, about collaboration. So
mm.
I'm anybody who knows me and like has listened to my talks or anything like that, I'm always about resiliency through relationships.
Oh,
And
tell us about that.
yeah, so no silos. It's about getting to know the people, and collaboration is key, whether that's your job or not. In terms of making a resilient business, you can't expect the risk department to do something on their own, HR to do something on their own, IT to do something on their, all those supply chain to do something on their own. You can't. You need to collaborate. You need to understand where the dependencies are between the business, the
Mm.
the what's the word, I expect my service IT to resume my services within half an hour, but they can't actually because you're not on their list of priority. It's, it's those
not
kind
not a good scenario.
Yeah, but it happens in the business, and
Of course it does. Yeah.
I've seen it a lot where there's an assumption from different parts of the business thinking, right, we're really our side and what we do is really important. Departmental goals are essential, but in the bigger picture of the organization, they don't get that actually the pecking order is probably not as critical. So you need that criticality, but to make people understand that, you need that collaboration.
Yeah. I mean, and I see from my own experience in working in change management, so often we have different departments that, they have no idea what they do impacts the other departments, whether I'm a purchasing manager or an accounting manager, or I'm in sales and inventory, everybody's interconnected and interdependent, aren't they? And it's important to understand and break down those silos. I mean, how can businesses do that though? Because it's so easy to just kind of get stuck in our own little world.
They can, yeah. So a lot of it is awareness. So a lot of businesses should have dedicated teams to doing this. So as a day job, that's my day job. A part of that. I mean, it depends on the size of the business too, but it's looking at like, what do we do as a business, talking with the key areas and saying, what do you do? And then like enabling those links, so being the facilitator. And this is what I love about my job, is you actually get to understand the whole business.
Fantastic. Yeah.
So it's really good, so you can connect the dots, which is essential. And then the way you also do that is you divide and conquer. You make people understand, and then they understand your point of view, and then you kind of come into the middle to meet the overall organizational objective. So you're on the same page. But then it's about the awareness piece, and then it's also about rehearsing it. So we've got all these plans, but you actually need to practice them. So you could have a 10-page book, but if you've not actually implemented some things that based on assumptions that you haven't practiced, then when things do happen, it's not really good. It's just going to be worthless. So it's about investing in the people and investing time to actually look at this, because at the end of the day, when a disruption does happen, if people have a relative idea about what's going on or what to do, you're in a better place than not. So prime example, for those organizations who had no contingency planning, when we were in complete lockdown. Now I appreciate that there won't be specific scenarios for this.
Sure, yeah.
If a business didn't know what their critical services were, they'll probably be struggling a bit more than those who have already identified it. You adapt. So if you've got a list, for example, to say, right, these are my 5 key areas that are really critical, automatically as a senior leader who is dealing with the crisis that actually these are critical areas, and then you can make an informed decision whether you bring in other departments depending on what's going on in the time of the year.
Right.
So in this pandemic, that the time it happened, it was around a lot of year-end, financial year-end, payroll.
Oh, that's a really intense time for business, isn't it? Yeah.
Exactly, because you want to get paid, you want to pay your suppliers. There's a whole strain on supply chain in terms of the constraints that's going on because they can't supply and demand and stuff. So how are you going to do that? And now for a lot of businesses, the finance part of it might not even be an issue, like depending on what time frame you're looking at. But actually in this time, you actually need to think about that. So it's looking at what's critical in the time of year that an incident might be happening. Again, if you've got some sort of indication of what these are, you're in a much better place than if you don't. Obviously, you're gonna do more of the firefighting rather than sitting back and thinking a bit more strategically about how to then enable business resilience or organizational resilience.
Yeah, gosh, and this is great. I mean, I'm wondering, if I was a smaller business, though, I might be thinking, I can see how these large organizations, they might have different departments that just focus on all these different aspects. How can I just as a small business owner do this? And I remember there was a great story you were giving me about, because I know one of your big successes is that, a lot of the businesses you help, they didn't have any continuity plans when you started. And you told me a great story about an example of just a fire drill that I think most of us can relate to, having to get out of the building in the fire drill. Tell us what happened there.
Yeah, so earlier on in my career, so after I'd come back from Canada and I'd moved to London, I was working for an organization, and so in terms of business continuity, nothing in place. It's been done by thousands of consultants before and really disengaged workforce. So it got to the time of let's rehearse our plan. So I got there to the meeting, took copies of the plan, looked at whether they bought copies of the plan or not, which is a fun one.
Step one.
you'll be surprised. People turn up to these rehearsals and they don't bring the plan with them. So you think like, okay, but that's a test in itself, isn't it? But it's a safe space to do the test.
Yeah.
So got there in a meeting, and a bunch of people, and someone came late, and all that. So we finally sat down, and I opened the plan. The first thing I did, even without looking at any critical service or process or whatever, I said, right, where's the fire, our evacuation point? And so that, a 10-minute debate, like, oh, it's just down the road or it's here. I'm like, right, let's just, you know what, guys, get up, show me where it is, where you think it is. And at this time, can I just remind you that the plan, I had bought the plan and it was sitting there. No one opened the plan and thought, oh yeah, it's this street, let's go there. So that was really fun.
So if the building burns down, we've lost the plan, I can just see where this is going.
Yeah, it's all about awareness, right? So we proceed to exit, and they're going towards the lift, and I'm like, no, it's a fire evac. I'm pretending it's a real thing. Let's go down the stairs. So I had, we were wearing like high heels, and there was someone who came with a hot lunch, so they were carrying a hot lunch downstairs. You're not allowed to do that, so don't ever do that. So it's just good observation. Right, like walk down. It was September. I remember this really clearly, and I've got a blog post about it as well. So if anybody wants to read it, it was cold, like sharp air. We're standing up. We eventually get to the evacuation point, and I'm like, right, so what now? I'm like, oh, where's the plan? And blah blah blah. So then we realized that they left it upstairs. But I had one in my hand, so I gave it to them, and then I'm like, right, okay, well, we need to call like this person. But then they left their Blackberries in the desk. Blackberries were like a big thing then.
Oh yeah.
So that was there, so we couldn't do that. Then one of the things was, let's go to our second office. I'm like, well, how are you going to let them know that you're coming? Is there space for your staff? So all that challenges. And then eventually it got to the point where, well, why don't you look at your plan and see what it says? Like, can you feasibly do that? At this point, you're just in your normal clothes. You don't have a coat on. All your car keys and stuff are upstairs. You can't get in. So one of the things I remember one of the participants saying was, well, we can all work from home now, which is great. But all the back then, you had to go on VPN, you had to have a fob.
Oh yes, I've done. Yeah, you've had to have the fob, and you've got to have a code, and it's got to be set up through IT, and of course you have to have the tech. And
so all that was locked in the drawers. Upstairs, we're in the building, so it was just really fun. And they were like, oh, it's a disaster, and I'm like, no, look, the whole point of this is for you to be engaged. And actually the simple thing of, you don't need a lot of money to do these things. Now a lot of people in the industry will say, well, we'll sell you fancy equipment and things like that, and systems to do this. But actually the organizations I've worked for, the budget has been limited, so you have to get creative and think outside the box. And so doing something as simple as that actually gets people engaged, and especially people engaged who don't actually like the idea of doing this because they think it's pointless. It's really effective. And I remember feeling so proud then a couple of days later when I got an email saying, yeah, it was really good. We're actually taking this seriously now. So
I tell you what, it sounds like a great learning experience, and obviously quite a funny story. But you know what? I bet everyone remembered it, don't they? And something we can all learn from. And that's you couldn't make this stuff up, really, could you?
No, and that's a very simple example. Obviously, as depending on your organization, the size of it, and and sometimes that doesn't even come in the scope of certain people's responsibilities.
Yeah.
Different ballgame depending on your organization. I just think if you can get creative with things like that, then it's really good. Like, sometimes you go into you're doing some rehearsals of plans, we call them validation. What I do is take straws and I cut the shortest straw, and then the person with the shortest straw has to start the game, like the scenario.
Oh, perfect.
It's just that little bit. It doesn't cost a lot. I've got straws in my drawer even now.
I'll never look at a straw the same way again.
Yeah, it's just like, and then one person has to take notes if they pick the second, the straw that is the second longest, shortest. They've got to do that, and I've done that with crisis management teams with senior people in it, and it's so minor, but it just creates a bit of, ooh, what's this?
But
What's
very
this?
effective. Yeah, that you don't
Yeah.
have to do expensive things to make a big impact. I think that what you were saying, that's one of the big myths in the industry, isn't it?
Yeah, I think so. Now, technology has changed and you've got to embrace that. And if your organization has the budget, then why not, invest in virtual reality and all that kind of stuff. I think that's fabulous too. And I've been in examples where we've done like rehearsals like this, and it's been you've got those virtual glasses on. It's great too. So you have to adjust according to your organization's capability, their appetite, the cost and all that kind of stuff. There's loads of stuff available, but simple things always work as well.
Do you think I was going to say that's an interesting point. Do you think virtual reality is something that'll be used quite a lot going
I
forward
think
in
so,
this business?
yeah.
Yeah.
I definitely, and I think it depends on the organization, but technology is advancing, and if you don't get on top of it, then it's going to come and disrupt you and your organization, and you don't want to be the one that's left behind. So if you can, then go along with it, because then you're not going to have a business if you don't adapt to that.
Yeah. Oh gosh, this is great. It's great stuff. And I mean, just kind of talking me through, because I know you said a lot of the businesses that you went into, some of the biggest successes you've had is that there just wasn't any continuity plans, and you've been handed teams that were less than engaged and managed to turn those situations around. What are some of the stories that you could share with us there?
Yeah, so and it's a good point, isn't it? Reflecting on what I've done and going into organization with disengagement people, it's again, it's all about resiliency through relationships. And how I do that is, before I even meet any stakeholders, I'll message them and ask them for a coffee.
Oh, I remember you saying this is one of the things you do every day. You try and have a coffee or a meet up with somebody, don't you,
Yeah,
to
I mean,
grow those relationships, don't you? That's a great habit for
yeah.
success, isn't it?
It is, especially when you're starting a program and you need to get people engaged. Instead of just going right in there and saying, right, we need to do A, B, and C, getting to know your stakeholders is really important, because actually, like that old age selling theory goes, like, you buy from people.
Mm.
And this is exactly the same thing. You need to have that connection. And a 20-minute coffee is not going to harm any productivity. I don't feel so. I think that's how you can get people to understand where you're coming from in terms of the
Mm.
work that you need to deliver and what they need to do, and then you can understand what their constraints are, and where they're coming from, and meet in the middle.
Kind of helping them to understand what's in it for them. Because I remember you saying that was one of the cases you'd had it's one of the projects you did where they were very opposed to the whole idea of risk management, and you just took the time to get to know the key individuals that were involved in that, and really managed to just get them on board, really, didn't you?
Yeah, it's investing the time. And I remember, specifically traveling from Milton Keynes, where I'm based, to London to meet one of my stakeholders, and who had just thought that they were doing a piece of work and it would take a couple of hours and they'd be done, to
Oh
having a
wow.
huge piece of work, on them to do this continuity planning, and
Mm.
being more resilient, and their frustrations, and it's just about investing that time. And now we have a great relationship. They own the work. It's great, but it takes time. It's frustrating, and I'm sick of. I was like, at the end of last year, the year before, I was sick of drinking coffees. So don't give me a cup again. But it helps. Don't ever underestimate the value of FaceTime. And right now, obviously, it's difficult because we're in the situation. You get video fatigue too now, but just nothing beats that. That kind of investment, because actually it's beneficial. You understand each other and how you work, and you can sway your requirements to that, and that's essentially what makes a resilient business. Like, you need resilient people in there. People are actually going to do the work for you, so you need to invest the time in them.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And well, I mean, tell us a bit more about your experience as a manager then, because I know, well, you've definitely got some lessons around leadership there I think we could all benefit from.
Yeah, so in my time, managed some teams. I think the first time I managed a proper team, it was really tough because I had inherited quite a difficult team. And
Ooh.
some managers are really lucky. They have the best team, no problems. But I got into a specific role, and it was just I found it a nightmare. Like it was just everything thrown at me in the book, where you use all the policies, procedures. Like some leaders go through their journeys without having any troubles, and I felt like I had all the troubles uh, thrown on me, and I was like, oh my god, what am I going to do? But it was a great learning curve because you get to understand people. You understand that it's not personal, and sometimes
I remember
it
that was
feels
a
that way.
critical lesson, wasn't it? It's not personal. It was all about their own agendas, wasn't, even if it was obviously not aligned with the team's agenda, was it?
Yeah, and Chris, it's really hard when you've got a team and they're not engaged, and you think that they hate you.
Oh,
To not think that it's personal, but you need to understand where they're coming from. And this is something that we've talked about before. And I feel like empire building is quite wrong in that sense.
oh, what do you
If
mean by empire building?
So a lot of the times, you'll see some leaders who will take certain staff with them because they like them, or they're your friends. So I hire someone in my team because I like them. But
Mm.
then, are they the right person for that job? That's what you have to
Oh,
ask.
yeah, I see. Yeah.
So in situations where I've been in personally, I've inherited in the past teams where I believe that they were there because of someone trying to empire build, and they're taking friends
Ooh,
along, and they're just wrong people for the job. So they're frustrated because they don't care about the job, not
yeah.
in the right role. It's difficult to kind of manage that, because you're stuck with that, and you've got you can't just get rid of people like that. It's not
No,
fair.
it's not that easy, is it? Sometimes you just have to work with what you're given, aren't you?
Yeah, and then when you leave, so if I empire build and then I leave for another opportunity, and then someone else comes in and then they inherit a team that isn't performing, and they just don't, they were there because they're getting away with doing nothing. It's not good because it doesn't make you look good as a leader, and it's not good for the staff as well. Because again, as a leader and a people manager, it's about empowering your staff to be the best they can be, and not seeing them as a threat.
Gosh, what do you think is one of the best ways? Because I know we were talking about, I remember one thing you said that really stood out to me is you're saying that, as a leader, it's really important to recognize that you don't have to be the smartest person in the room. Your job is to get the best from the people you have. And some of those people on your team might be more of an expert than you in certain areas. I mean, how do you kind of get your ego out the way to do that?
It's actually first recognizing that that's the case, right? Because
Okay, fair enough.
awareness, but recognizing that you're there in that position for a reason,
Mm.
because you've got those skills to, as a leader, to think more strategically, and your job isn't to think about the minute details. You've got a team of experts doing that, and you need to trust them and they need to trust you, because at the end of the day, if they're really good, it makes you look good and you make them look good. So it's
Sounds
mutually beneficial.
Sounds like a win-win. And I love a win-win when it comes to work. Yeah. I mean, is there any advice that you'd give people just, kind of starting off in the industry? Because I know as well that you're a real champion for women in resilience as well. Tell us a little bit about how you work on that.
Yeah, so I think that drives from. I mean, I got the opportunity to be sit on the committee and the board for the Business Continuity Institute's Women in Resilience Initiative, and it's a fairly new thing. And I was approached by the committee to be on it,
Oh,
through some of the work that I'd been doing outside and displaying on LinkedIn. But I think it's really important, and I feel quite strongly about it, because the industry was heavily male dominated. So
right. Mm,
when I was in my 20s, and I was saying this earlier about the age and um, gender thing, when I
right.
used to go to networking opportunities and put myself out there, and it was scary as uh, I was the only female in that room.
Oh, that must have been intimidating.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, I just didn't. I've always kind of like dealt with that, so I didn't really see it like as. I just thought, oh well, okay, fine. And then I remember going to certain events and then seeing another woman and connecting immediately with
Sure.
them.
Yeah.
So there's a lady that I will always remember. Her name's Catherine, and we were like, we just looked at each other and we're like, yes, like let's be friends.
Another friendly face. Yeah.
Yeah, so but now there's so many, and I think every woman that I've spoken to in the industry has always felt that way. They felt, oh, I'm the only person, only women like going to these industry events, and you're thinking, where do these all come from? So the BCI, they created a whole host of events, and the first one I remember, there were like hundreds of women there, and I was thinking to myself, where
Oh,
did all these
wow.
come
How
from?
amazing.
Yeah, so it's kind of like saying that, okay guys, we're here, there's a support network, there's specific challenges women face, and then there's the resilience industry. We're here to support each other and not be competition, but it's also about representation. So for me, like, I feel it's really great that I'm on this platform and I've got a voice, because at these events, like, people like come up to me and they've noticed that I've, on the committee, because they've seen me post stuff on LinkedIn or whatever.
Mm.
um, but also it's not just female, but it's like looking at women from different ethnicities as well. So
Mm.
one of the things is, when I was starting out in my career, I didn't really have any role models who were A, female, and then A, who looked like me, like a representation.
Mm.
And I know that's quite a popular thing now, and I never really thought much about it. But
Mm.
now I think it's really important that actually there are, and I don't want to make it specifically a race, a race thing, but if you feel that, oh yeah, if someone sees me and they're of in similar background to me, and they think, oh, she's doing all these things, maybe I can. For
Mm.
me, that's great. I've got women who message me saying, how can I get involved in doing stuff for, women in resilience, or
Fantastic. Yeah.
yeah, and then of different, like, some who are very similar backgrounds to me, and I think that's really great, because I didn't have that in my 20s. um, so I feel like that's really nice to have, and I'm like really proud that I can kind of be an advocate of that, and I will continue to be as long as I can.
Oh, that's fantastic. I mean, and this is, we're sort of starting to touch a little bit on like the whole area of like diversity and inclusion, aren't we? Because we need each other, don't we? I mean, men and women,
Yeah,
both sides have their unique strengths and perspectives to bring to the whole aspect around, business resilience and continuity. So, I mean, yeah, clearly, how is it? I mean, when you went to those networking events and you were the only female there, I mean, how did you kind of bridge that gap? Start to kind of, put your mark out there in terms of someone to be listened to in that industry.
yeah. Through a lot of practice, is scary. I remember moving to London, and I thought it was the scariest thing ever. Despite going to Canada twice, moving, and then
I
I
know it's a
went.
little bit different.
Yeah, yeah. By the way, I was living in Edinburgh at that time, so that's why, just to put a bit of context to it. But I
Okay.
made sure that I would go out there and put myself out there and go to these network events. And I remember going there and thinking, oh, there's all these men there. They're really like, really experienced, and I'm here in my 20s, like, what have I got to offer? But I just thought, you know what? If no one talks to me, I'm going to go up to you and talk to you. So it's just, right, hi, I'm Rina, what do you do? Or, something like that, and just getting out of that moment where it feels scary, and then just talking to whoever. It is awkward. It is awkward. um, but that one of the reasons it can be less awkward now, because there's platforms where you can have natural conversations. So just before this pandemic hit, with the women in resilience thing, I hosted and led speed networking. um,
Hmm.
so you just move around, and that helped get the awkwardness out of it, and it was really good. And we had lessons learned because we didn't have a whistle and things like that. But it was
Yeah.
really good. Like, people really felt it was valuable and it wasn't awkward. Like, I never did anything like that when I started getting
Hmm.
into all that sort of thing. And it doesn't matter if you're a male or female, or I just didn't feel that I didn't feel like that was a thing. I was just used to it. I was just used to being like the only female in a group of like 10 men or whatever. And it was just what it was. I guess people remembered me.
Well, and I mean, in my own experience, I mean, I've often found that even, people are just people, aren't they? And of course, it's easy for us to be kind of intimidated by other people who've been out there longer and, seem to have a greater level of success than us. But it's all about just connecting with people. And I've often found that, when you approach anyone really, as long as you're friendly and you're genuinely interested in them, it usually goes fairly well, doesn't it?
Yeah, I mean, it's about like making people remember you. So when I moved to London and I was networking, I created my own little business cards, and they were like this big, half the size, really thick cards, and they were called, it had risk size on it, and I'd give them out and people would remember me. And so that was a unique point of remembrance. Now
Great
probably
idea.
in the past, yeah. um you know I remember people saying to me, oh yeah, you should do presentations. And then they'd look at like I like wearing colourful scarves when I'm out. So they'd be like, oh, you've got a strike. People, I would pay to listen to you because talk about
Fantastic. Yeah.
striking. So, and I just used to brush it off. Like there's so many people that said to me, you should present and things like that. And for a long time I brushed it off and I thought, yeah, okay, whatever. But you need to listen to those kind of things, feedback that people give you, because actually there's some element of truth in there that they see what you can't see in yourself. And if a lot of
Yeah.
people are saying that to you, be it men or women, it's actually probably quite genuine, and
Mm.
it gives you that awareness. So, and you don't get that if you don't go out and network and put yourself out there.
Yeah, you're right. It's all about taking that jump out the comfort zone, isn't it? That's so great. And I know you've said that, it's really important, especially with like all the resources you have on the Resilience Pod and your blog, that you want these resources to be available free to people starting off, because that was really important to you, because when you started out, you didn't have anything like this.
Yeah, absolutely. I got paid to do the business continuity course, and then I was told, right, you're the expert now. Off you go and do
Oh
do it.
gosh. Wow. Okay, that must have
Thought,
been
okay,
interesting.
I thought I'm supposed to be doing risk management here. Like now I'm doing business continuity, fell into it. What the hell? Like so, and then it was me researching online, thinking like, what can I do that's different? And then I,
Mm.
spoke to people, networked, but there wasn't really anything out there because either you had to pay for it, or there was a lot of like consultancy was massive, like booming back then. So you'd get like a sneak preview, and then get lured in, and you have to pay for it. And I was with organizations that didn't have money to do that sort of thing. Paying for my course was a big deal. The course is a couple of grand, so that's
Oh
a
wow.
huge.
Yeah, that is kind of an investment, isn't it? Yeah. So obviously you wanted to make sure that you're getting some good return.
Yeah, so I thought, well, I had this blog, and it had been on and off for a couple of years, but I was just sharing my frustrations, more experiences, just getting other people on to do like guest posts and things like that. And I just thought I could have really benefited from that when I was starting out, just
Mm.
something to go to just get an idea. And that's why my resilience pod is free, and I don't ask people to pay for it, because actually right now there's a huge influx of people that I do videos and collaborations with, where they're talking about their journey and their ideas. Now that puts you in touch with someone else in the industry. You could get a job, you could do a collaboration, and I know for a fact that people who have come on and done some work with me have actually then gone on to collaborate with other people and benefited from that. that
Oh,
for
that's
me
fantastic.
that for me is success. So actually, it's just the love of it, really. But there's opportunity for people to do like paid content, like sponsorships and sponsoring of videos and stuff like that. I'm working with someone right now to do like a PR press product. So it just depends on the what you're looking for and what that person's looking for, and whether it aligns to me. But yeah, a majority of it's going to be free for people who are it's going to be valuable to people who are starting out in the industry and those seasoned as well, because just because you've been in the industry for 6 years, 10 years doesn't mean you know it all.
Yeah, gosh, and I mean, this so sort of touches on media and PR. And I think, if you were going to do anything besides resilience or risk management, what other sort of profession do you think you'd have a go at?
Do you know what's really funny? Because I was thinking, like, what would I do? Because I fell into this whole industry. I was talking to someone um, a couple of weeks ago. We had a phone call, a lady, and she thought that I was a journalist and a media
Oh,
presenter.
really?
Yeah, like I was just really taken aback by it, because she'd seen me at an event that I was like hosting, the speed networking event that I was telling you about as part of a bigger event. And
Uh-huh.
she thought that I was just a journalist reporter with an interest in resilience, and because she'd seen some of my videos on LinkedIn and stuff like that with other people, that she just thought that's what I did as a day job. So I thought, well, maybe I could try that.
Yeah. Oh, you'd be fantastic, I think.
Thank you.
Absolutely
Yeah.
amazing.
Although
Oh,
if you had asked me this 6 years ago, I probably wouldn't have said that.
well, but see, doesn't that just show how much you've sort of grown and changed and become resilient yourself? I mean, this is such a fascinating industry. I mean, what sort of projects or research are you doing at the moment?
Yeah. So from it's never ending. There's always stuff to do. From a
Mm,
work point of view, resilience, I'm actually looking at what the resilience landscape looks like in the current organization that I'm with, because it's always different in different organizations. And there's that
mm,
term organizational resilience thrown about, and there's not really, it's open to interpretation. But what I'm working on is looking at, right, okay, where do all the different disciplines sit? Um,
mm.
you have the prepare and protect disciplines, which are looking at, IT, risk management, security, all that kind of stuff that are like pre kind of looking at the risks and putting controls in place. And then you have the respond and recover disciplines, like business continuity, crisis management.
Ah, right.
So what are we going to do when the incident happens? So what does that landscape, resilience landscape,
What does
look
it
like?
mean?
Yeah, what does it mean to our organizations? Because it's really confusing. And when you work in a large organization like I do, everybody's titles, you get mixed merged with different, everybody has the same title. So there's like loads of people who are called resilience managers, and it
Mm.
confuses it
So
confuses
what does it
stakeholders.
actually mean? I've learned a whole new vocabulary this week as I've been getting ready for this interview. Business continuity management, of course, resilience and risk management. But yeah, there's the whole vernacular around this, isn't there?
Yeah, there is. And what makes us resilience managers is you're not just looking at a single discipline, you're looking at how you can connect the dots to the rest of the disciplines
Yeah.
and make a resilient business and thrive. And that goes back to my 3 points I made earlier about planning, collaboration, and rehearsing. All
Mm.
that you need to be able to join the dots. So, I'm working on a piece that will help kind of make it a bit clearer, so then the organization can communicate it to the rest of its stakeholders, because there's a lot of confusion. And I think it's a good piece of work. And I think anyone, if you're struggling with that awareness, it's a good piece of work to look at, to say, well, what does it actually mean to our organization? Who's doing what? And where do the responsibilities kind of, where do we cross over like that? Um,
Yeah. I mean, and I know obviously your resilience pod is a fantastic resource for people. I mean, if there's any sort of, sort of mid to larger size, businesses out there that are looking for some ideas around, how do we sort of sit down and kind of put this plan together and just kind of do the basics right, really, in terms of resilience? I mean, where would you send them?
Yeah, so a lot of people ask for, oh, can I have a business continuity plan template? And ask
Oh,
that.
right.
And I had someone ask me that, and I would say don't send templates to people, because it depends on the organization. Each organization is different. Anybody
Mm,
who sends you a template is not asking the right questions.
mm,
First, you need to ask, what is it that your business are doing? What's critical? What are your core processes? What are you going to focus on when an incident happens? And
mm-hmm,
then assess the impact of not doing that. And you need to assess the whole organization. Then
mm.
look at the template comes later on in the stage. So it's actually engaging with someone who knows what they're doing and is not going to just sell you generic templates, because I don't feel that they help. But then what works for where I work in my organization might
Mm.
not work for you, Chris. Because if you came to me
Yeah.
and said, right, I've got this business and how can I make sure that I can continue? I'm not going to give you a template. I'm going to try and understand your business. What do you do? What's
Mm,
more important? What can you stop doing? And then tailor
mm.
the plans around that. So it's actually finding someone who understands that.
Yeah,
Um,
and it sounds like it's really got to be a customized approach, doesn't it? Because as you say, every business is different, and that core aspect of really understanding what business are you in, and it's not just understanding what the actual product or service is that you sell, but it's what are the benefits that your customers or your clients get from that
exactly.
product or service. That's the business that you're in,
Yeah.
and of course in COVID, a lot of us have had to kind of readjust that and kind of think of new new products or services that we might be able to offer or deliver them in a different way so that we can meet clients' needs and obviously survive and thrive as a business.
Yeah, I mean, there's guidelines and principles too. So there's Business Continuity Institute have principles and guidelines that you can start off with if you want to go that way.
All right.
Um,
Okay.
so there's a foundation of it, but they never offer templates because it's bespoke to your business. So
Yeah.
what I suggest is looking at guidance that's out there. If you want to be ISO certified or not, don't try and do that before you can even you even assess what your business is.
Mm.
I think it's understanding what it is you're trying to achieve, and then tailoring it to that.
Yeah. And I mean, are there independent consultants out that they're, sorry, independent, consultants or experts out there that, smaller or larger size SMEs could go to if they wanted to
Oh
have
yeah, definitely.
like an expert come in and actually guide them through this process in
Yeah,
their business.
yeah, definitely. There's loads. I can do that too. So, what you need to do is connect with the person and be able to see that the credibility that they're being able to offer when you're looking for someone, and then
Absolutely.
you need to understand that if they're asking challenging questions because they're trying to find information and they're not afraid to do that.
Yeah.
If you came to me and I was just like, okay, yeah, I'll have everything done for you in a day, I would question that.
Yeah. It doesn't sound like it's a very quick process to turn these things around. Gosh, and
No.
oh, so I mean, Rena, this is just so fantastic. There's so much gold here, so much value for our listeners. And I'm just, just to kind of sort of draw things to a close. I mean, if people want to find out more about you, obviously I will put the links to Rena's Resilience Pod podcast in the follow-on post to this. But also, is there anywhere else that people can find you or learn more about you?
Yeah, so I'm on Instagram at Resilience Pod. I've got the website resiliencepod.com.
Yep.
YouTube is on there. So if you just type in Resilience Pod, you'll see everything that comes up. It's easier to search for me that way rather than my name because there's a lot of Rina Singhs, and then I've got a lot
I've
of
noticed, yeah.
and I've got a lot of stuff with my maiden name because obviously I changed my name when I got married. So if you just type in Resilience Pod, you'll
Oh,
find
right.
me. I'm on LinkedIn too. My profile's open, so I'm happy to connect with anyone. And yeah,
Excellent. Fantastic. Well, listen, thank you so much for your time today and for this fantastic recording. For all you listeners, apologies if I've not been able to load my Facebook page properly. So I'm sorry if I've missed any comments here, but there will be a replay available because I think I had a couple things pop up that people were like, oh, where do I go to listen? Because I'm not on Facebook. I will be posting the replay of this of the interview shortly, so you won't miss out. And again, Rina, you've been a fantastic guest today. I'm so excited to have had the opportunity to interview you and share your knowledge and your wisdom about resilience today. Thank you very much.
thank you for having me. It's been great, and hopefully I'll see you soon.
Okay. Cheers,
Yeah,
Ed.
everyone for joining. Bye.